Good morning. Today we have a special program on spiritual discussion, and the topic is ABC of Hinduism. And we have a special guest, Professor Pandey from Santa Cruz, California. So let's welcome Professor Pandey from Santa Cruz, California.
Sir, I'm very happy to join you. I'm an anthropologist, and as an anthropologist, I have been studying religion since 1962. Originally, I worked among the Tharus of Himalayan Terai. They live in Nepal as well as in Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, the hilly parts of Bihar as well as Uttar Pradesh. And then when I came to the United States as a graduate student in anthropology at Chicago, I wanted to study religion, and that too among the Native Americans. But at that point, it was very difficult to study religion because Native Americans felt that they had been exploited by the dominant society, and the dominant society had stolen their belief system. So religion for them is the principal marker of their identity, besides their language, besides their food, besides their customs and traditions. But being from India and having some knowledge of religion was very helpful to my research there. So my Native American friends always reminded me that, look, what you are asking us is about our doings, what we really do in actuality. And since these are basically non-literate people, they don't have a recorded tradition, textual tradition as we in India do, that really made me realize that perhaps the religion of the Vedas, the basis of Hinduism, must have been very much like their religion. And as in the Vedas, if you take the Rig Veda, the oldest of the Vedas, we have some 33 divine beings who are really honored, who are really worshipped in various contexts, and human beings really try to identify with the forces of nature. So far as the nature as a marker of religion is concerned, I think Hindu religion is the best example one can imagine. And that is what European scholars in the 19th century, early 20th century were saying. So if you really look at religion from a scholarly point of view, religion has two components. One is the belief system, one is the cosmology, the belief system. What do the believers really believe in? What are the principles? What are the rules? What are the guidelines? And the other is how they are really actualized in reality. That is how religion is really practiced on the ground, the religious practices. Hinduism is really very rich in both, as you know, coming from the Vedas, then Upanishads, and then our epic tradition, Ramayana and the Mahabharata, and then the Puranas and the Dharma Shastras. So our textual tradition, scriptures, are really wonderful. And one of the strengths of Hinduism is that right from the very beginning, it really accepted the idea of multiple ways of constructing the divine. That there is not just one way of constructing the divine, as Christianity has through Bible or through Jesus Christ, or as Islam has through Quran or through Muhammad, the Prophet. Hinduism right from the very beginning really realized that truth is one and there are multiple ways to talk about it. So as a result, the idea of diversity was really the basis of how Hinduism really emerged. In order to understand the shape and form of Hinduism now, in 2012, we really have to go into the history, how it really started, how it really grew, developed, and how it really reacted to the kind of forces which were emerging within Hinduism as well as which were presenting a challenge to it from the outside. So within the Hindu tradition, the two traditions which are extremely important, one beginning with Jain, the Jain Muni Mahavir, and the other beginning with the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautam, the Buddha, the great Buddha, and both Buddha as well as Jain Muni Mahavir were not really presenting any kind of a challenge to Hinduism. They really did not want to negate Hinduism. They really wanted to reform Hinduism. So my understanding as an anthropologist is that by, say, 600 BC or 700 BC, the period when Buddhism and Jainism really started to emerge, Hinduism had been monopolized by the priests, by the Brahmins, and in the way the Catholicism has been monopolized by the Catholic priests. So similarly, the Brahmins really became the managers of Hindu way of constructing reality. And if you really wanted to approach any divine, if you really wanted to do anything which was construed as religion, you really had to approach it through the Brahmins, through the priests. And that to some extent was really not acceptable by some of the non-Brahmins like the Kshatriyas and perhaps the Vaishyas. And as a result, this is no accident that Buddha was not a Brahmin or Mahavir was not a Brahmin. So they really wanted to reform Hinduism from within. And to some extent, as you know, they succeeded. So long as the state was in their hand, I don't think there was ever a Jain state, but there was certainly a Buddhist state from the time of Ashoka. And as a result, when the state patronized religion, Buddhism, then it really became a dominant force in India, and then it went to other parts of Asia like Sri Lanka or like Burma or like Cambodia and Vietnam and China and Korea and Japan and other places. And by and by, because of the intervention of many Hindu reformers, in particular Shankaracharya, Buddhism started to disappear from India, and then Hinduism took over some of the things which the great Buddha was really teaching, and Hinduism also appropriated Buddha and his teachings by making Buddha an avatar, one of the incarnations of Vishnu. And as a result, Buddhism was no longer a negative force or a challenging force for the Hindus. But Hinduism really could not contain Islam. Hinduism really took the challenge of Islam really quite clearly. And Islam, the book-oriented religion, when it really starts in the Middle East, it really spread like a wildfire, because it was not a religion in which there was a lot of emphasis on rituals or on traditions. There was a lot of emphasis on what people really did in actuality. So what people did in actuality was really extremely important, because the Prophet Muhammad really thought that there is just one God, that God is really great, and we really have to approach that God, we really have to submit ourselves to the authority of that God. And all human beings are really equal in the eyes of that God, Muhammad. And that idea really was very appealing to the non-Brahmins, and in particular to the people at the lower strata of the society, who had been really oppressed by the Brahmins and other upper caste people who had really monopolized religion. So to a large extent, in order to understand conversion in Hinduism, one really has to understand the authoritarian nature of the Hindu society during that period, and how it was not really fully acceptable to certain sectors of the society. And that society was too eager to embrace Islam. Similarly, in the same way, one can also understand Sikhism, because Sikhism as a religion is completely book-oriented, and from the time of Guru Nanak until the 10th Guru, the teachings of all the Gurus are really in that book, embodied, and that in that book, the Guru Granth Sahib, and the Granth or the book itself really becomes divine. And the Granthi, the person who really recites the Granth, or reads the Granth and followers come and listen to him. So that tradition to a large extent is really also the Hindu tradition, because the epics Ramayana and Mahabharata and other kind of kathas like Satyanarayan Katha and Sri Lokinath Katha and other kinds of katha were really narrated by the Kathavachaks, and as a result, to the non-literate people who really could not understand Sanskrit, that was one way they can really approach Hinduism or practice Hinduism. So Hinduism as a religion is really wonderful, because Hinduism does not give just one prescription that the only way you can become religious is this way. Hinduism, right from the very beginning, says that there are multiple ways of approach the divine, and divine is one in multiple forms. It is in that context that one can really understand the idea of avatar or the idea of incarnation. So there are many Hindus who will really consider Shiva as the principal god. There are many Hindus who will regard Vishnu as the ultimate god, the ultimate divine, and then the incarnations of Vishnu such as Krishna or Ram, and later on even Buddha. And then now the 10th avatar Kalki is yet to be born, but many people really have some ideas about what Kalki is really going to look like. So in that sense, the very important point about Hinduism is that Hinduism is one religion which really right from the very beginning allows diversity, which really tells people how they can be tolerant about other ways of doing religion, other ways of approaching the divine or practicing their religion. And as a result, unlike Christianity and Islam, there was not really that much warfare. Hindus really never became a kind of militaristic people that you have to win over the non-Hindus through force. Non-violence was a very important way of living, and non-violence was a very important way of dealing with other human beings who were either like you or even different from you. Tolerance was really very important in the context of Hinduism, and as a result we really never became a kind of warrior people as you find in Christianity, the Crusades, or as you find in Islam. The other point which I find very appealing about Hinduism as a Hindu, that as a Hindu I don't make the claim that my way is the only way and everybody has to follow that. So as practicing Christians will say that the only way you can be really saved is by converting to Christianity, or as the Muslims will claim that the only way is the one shown by the Prophet Muhammad, and if you follow that you are a Muslim, if you don't follow that you are a kafir, and then you have to be gotten rid of or you have to be subdued. I keep saying that so long as Islam has that kind of an ideology, or Christianity has that kind of an ideology or worldview, then a kind of inter-religious or interfaith dialogue is not really going to happen. So I'm not really saying that I'm a Hindu and Hinduism is the only way, because Hinduism does not permit me to do that. But what Hinduism permits me to do is say that, look, you can be a Hindu and you can live with non-Hindus who are constructing the divine in their own way. So they are not really in my way. And as a result, I can very well live with Christians, I can very well live with Muslims, I can live with people who are following different faiths, or even people who are agnostic, who are non-religious. So I see Hinduism as a wave of the future, and more people in the world will really see the beauty of Hinduism and Hindu way of life, and they will find it very attractive. As you know, in many parts of the world, many thoughtful people have come out of whatever their traditions were, and they have embraced Hinduism.
So thank you, Professor Pandey. It was very enlightening discussion. I got a couple of questions, and the first question is, there is a say, if you don't stand for nothing, you will fall for anything. So as you see that, we don't go pray only one God, we pray this thing, that thing. So that's one way you could say that we should to fix one God and work. So an advantage. So what you would like to comment on the Hinduism where people have multiple gods and
I see what you are saying, and there may be that reading of Hinduism, but it is not really so. It does not say that we don't stand for anything. We do stand for something, but we don't say that what we stand for is the only thing we can legitimately claim to be right, and others are wrong. So we don't go to that extent. So we don't become fanatical about our being Hindu. Some people may, but Hinduism is one religion which really acknowledges diversity, which really acknowledges that there are different ways you can really approach the divine. So when our tradition says that God is one, Satyo hi eko, Dipro Bahudha Vadanti, learned people speak about it in many different ways, then that idea is that we have already accepted. We already stand on the ground that God is one, and we are worshipping that God in our own way. So I don't say that you just worship my God, and if you don't worship my God, then you become an enemy. We don't say that, So.
And my second question is, you told in the beginning of Hinduism, there's a lot of caste systems, and the Brahmins, they try to dominate, from where the Jainism and Buddhism started, because they want everybody equal. So you think there's something wrong with the system?
Here again, largely to that extent, or respect for tolerance, or respect for diversity, that we allow Buddhists and Jains to coexist with us. And in many respects, what really happened, that Swami Shankaracharya, point by point, he was really trying to negate what Buddha might have construed as the negative side in Hinduism. So in a way, because in many respects, Buddha was saying that there has to be unity in what one thinks and what one does. So if I just think of good things and do all harmful things in my actual life, that is not really right. So Buddha really emphasized that thinking and acting should go hand in hand. If I think well of you, I should also do things which will really help you. So in a way, because not that I have become the great Siddh, the perfect person, and as a result I will go and retire to the Himalayas and I try to transcend this ritual cycle of birth and rebirth and become one with Brahma. So this is not what Buddhism was really emphasizing. Buddha was really emphasizing that look, there is a way of perfection, becoming a Buddha, enlightened one, and that is by really being truthful, being honest, being helpful to others, and also being non-violent, because every form of life we see here on this, in this universe was really created by the divine. And divine is part of everything. So if I am doing harm to one thing, then I am also harming myself. It is simply a question of how one really looks at oneself. So we as Hindus, my feeling is that we don't look ourselves as distinct kind of beings, separate from animals, or separate from fish, or separate from other forms of life, because in our avatar, Dasha avatar, different forms of life are deified. And as a result, we have an attitude of reverence to different forms of life. And that's really the unique feature of Hinduism.
Would you like to comment on this non-violence? Hinduism sort of promotes non-violence, but at the same time, you see there are a lot of sacrifice of animals in the name of pleasing the god.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when we human beings worship, different forms of life, because we see the divine in them in the way we see the divine in one another. So from our point of view, we may use them for food, but it does not mean, as the Vedas say, that annam evam shariram idam, this body is made of what you eat, and then what is the purpose of the body? Sharir madhyam khalu dharma sadhana. That body is simply a means to achieve our dharmas, to do the kind of things which are right for us. So in a way, because what I'm really saying, that it is only in that context you can understand that why we will worship a cow, or why we will worship hunch, a bird, or why we will worship even Matsya, a kind of avatar of Vishnu in the form of a fish. So what I'm really saying, that from our point of view, the attitude of reverence we have towards different forms of life, it symbolically it is really represented in the story of the Avatar. I think, as you know, in the Hindu tradition, at least in the Vedas, animal sacrifices were really quite common. But we really, in a way, I prefer the term sacrifice, because we were really sacrificing the animals, and we were offering them to the divine beings, and then that really became consecrated food, and it was really shared in the community. Then, and I'm just guessing, as you know, we don't have historical records, but we just have to go by some clues. My understanding is that by 7th century BC, there was overemphasis on killing of the animals in war, as well as in games, as well as for food purposes. And as a result, it is no accident that both Jain Muni Mahavir as well as Buddha Dev really started to emphasize the idea of moderation. They started to say that do whatever you are doing in a moderate way. So Buddha really never emphasized non-killing of animals in the way Mahavir did, because in Jain tradition, every form of life is sacred, and as a result, we really don't have any right to kill any form of life. But if we take that to the extent to which some of the Jain Munis have taken it, then life will become very difficult. So we really made the kind of compromise, and we said that, look, we have to kill the animals in order to eat, in order to sustain our life. Because Vedas also say that jiva se bhodana, that life sustains life. But we should not really do it beyond our needs. We really did not do it so that they will really disappear, and as a result, there will be a kind of scarcity, and we will start having a hard time. So our tradition always really emphasized the idea of moderation, and that moderation to a large extent became a kind of religion for the Buddhists. When Buddha started to emphasize the idea of the middle way, the Madhya Marga. I just wanted to say that, look, the very idea of religion is very sublime, and religion has played a very important role in making us what we have become. But for one or another reason, and one has to really go into history, if there were periods in the history of Christianity or Islam when these religions really became very violent, and they really did not want to accept the acceptance of any other religion, and that really promoted warfare, that aspect I really want them to understand why it happened, and in order to come to terms with the globalized reality as it is in the 21st century, they really cannot impose their way of life by force, as at certain periods in their history they had really done. So the only way globalization allows us to live side by side and do whatever kind of things we really want to do, so long as they don't hurt one another, is really the way which Hinduism has shown the idea of coexistence. That you really have to accept me for what I am doing, as a legitimate way of living my life if you want me to accept you in the way you are really doing it. So I am really against the idea of inferiority and superiority based on religion, that since I worship just one God, Christ, or since I worship just one God, Allah, as a Muslim, then I am better than the Hindus who have many gods and many forms of life they worship. So that is not acceptable to me in 2012.
Would you like to say what is this common good thing about all the religions? There must be something good among all of them. Would you like to comment?
As you know, the good things as I see in both Islam as well as Christianity is in the way they really emphasize the idea of equality. We have the idea of equality in our own tradition, but because of historical reasons, our society became very defensive in our encounter with Islam, and as a result, we more or less confined women, secluded women only to the domestic domain. And also at an earlier period in our history, we said that the Vedic knowledge is accessible only to the twice-born people who go through the idea of Yajnaparit and all that, initiation rites. And since women do not go through that, women cannot hear the Vedas, or untouchables cannot hear the Vedas. That might have been so at one point in our history, but now it is not really acceptable. Now we should really try to promote the idea of equality. We live in a democratic society, and as a result, the idea of equality, which is inbuilt in Islam as well as Christianity, to a large extent is a wonderful idea, and we as Hindus should really try to learn from it and see that we also, since our tradition allows that there are different ways to approach the divine, why are we saying that this tradition is better than that tradition? So everybody who is trying to approach the divine, everybody who is trying to go to the Jagannath should be allowed to do that, because Jagannath is the Lord of the universe. So if Lord of the universe is there, why he has to be appropriated only by the Pandey or only by the Hindus? Everybody should have access to him. He is the Lord of the universe.
Thank you, Professor Pandey. It was so much educational for me and for our viewers, and I hope you will join us again very soon and come up with some another educational discussion. Thank you, Professor Pandey.
Naresh Babu, thank you so much. I enjoyed doing what you asked me to do, and I will be happy to repeat it whenever you want to do it. Yeah.